I wish.
29-year veteran of Microsoft. He is one of the architects on their M365 team. I think specifically around some of the APIs and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Copilot extensibility.
Yep. Great, Copilot extensibility, all that kind of stuff. You will notice that he was not originally from here, and he's from Coeur d'Alene. No, actually, you're from. He came from the other side of the pond, and has joined us over here. Seattle, yeah, right, that pond. But I think another pond before then, so on going east. So anyway, give a hand to Gareth. Thanks for coming and joining us.
Thanks so much. All right. So, thanks for still being here at the end. I want to spend about 45 minutes talking to you a bit about Copilot 365 extensibility. So, thank you for the introduction. I've been at Microsoft, as you said, about 29 years, which is pretty freaking scary. And you can imagine I've done quite a lot of things in that time. It has never been as bonkers as it is now. I hope bonkers translates appropriately, transatlantically. The world is a really crazy place now, and our corner of the industry is an exceptionally crazy place. Everybody is running around like, I don't know, I don't really know any politically correct euphemisms for what people are running around that are American. But running around real fast and often real confused and often with, some direction for about 12 minutes until the latest new thing gets dropped by, by Anthropic or Microsoft or OpenAI, and then we'll just spin over there and run in that direction for a few minutes and then spin elsewhere. I hope it'll settle down. I'm sure it will settle down. Or, the machines will take over and they'll run around for us instead, one or the other. But, yeah, if you're feeling a bit crazed by it all right now, you're not alone. I'm going to talk a bit about extensibility of M365 Copilot. So I thought I should check first, who has M365 in their org here? That's most of you. And who has got Copilot switched on in their org? About 80% of that first set of people. Cool. And who has in any way built anything that extends or touches or interacts with Copilot? Oh, like one of you, I think. So that's pretty great. You've got the right tools, most of you, to be able to do this. But most of you haven't done it. So hopefully there's something interesting to pick over here, and I can send you home with a few ideas for some fun stuff you might be able to do. Sound good? All right. So I'll do the sort of architecture bit first. Obviously, we're talking about M365 Copilot here, not our consumer Copilot product. So really what we're talking about here is the way we're going to connect to our enterprise and use AI tooling in our enterprise. And particularly in terms of AI tooling, what we're really talking about here is building agents. The world has pivoted really, really fast through different kinds of AI approaches, and we're sort of landing on this notion of an agent being, and it depends how much of a tolerance you've got for corporate cheese, to be honest, but a digital co-worker, or a computer buddy, or I don't know, whatever you like really, but some bit of technology that is going to take a bunch of the strain, hopefully, off you and your colleagues for doing work that at this point is more in the kind of rote end of things, that stuff that you would you'd ideally prefer that you could hand off to somebody else, and today you might try and hand it off to whoever you can persuade will take it. Well, if you've got somebody who's always willing to take tasks and doesn't care if they're mundane, well, that's kind of nice, right? And that's where I try and think about the sweet spot for this stuff at the moment. It's moving so fast that, you'll be saying, hey, go run the company in 5 minutes' time, right? But the path to get there is very much through proving to people, hey, it's good at doing the first set of things, it's successful at that. We all know, anybody who's played with anything from ChatGPT upwards, that sometimes the results are a bit weird, requires humans to look over things. It goes off in strange directions. All of these things are in that place. That will slowly get better. It will never go away. That's why we talk about this stuff as a co-pilot, that it's predominantly helping humans, and it requires a human to supervise and make sure it hasn't gone off into the weeds or some very strange place that it might sometimes go off into. And there are tasks and guardrails and things we can build, and we can build AIs that cross-check each other and that kind of thing. For things at the lower end of the spectrum, and just let it get on with those. Or the things that, honestly, it's not the end of the world if what you get is something, a little bit strange. If it's the invites to the corporate Christmas party sort of thing, well, I don't know. Some people might find it pretty important that it doesn't say inappropriate things about Santa, but you know what I mean. But what we're really, as a sweet spot with Copilot for M365 and extensibility talking about, is moving past just helping you do something yourself and into the realm of helping you interact with the data that's key for your business or your customer's business. Or for that, for those systems to come and work alongside you using the same kind of intelligence that you're used to getting when you're working with productivity tools. So this is an IDM number, I believe, and they're talking about big numbers and not very far away. And I think we're looking at a curve that's really pretty much hockey sticking. As it gets easier and easier to build things, there's a huge number of tools, and you'll see Microsoft's marketing people pushing very much the low-code / zero-code tools for creating small agents that can go on and do targeted work. You'll get an absolute ton of that at any of our sort of appearances. I figured you all are here for .NET Conf. You're going to want to talk about more developer-centric things. So I'm going to sort of move on past all of the Copilot Studio and that kind of stuff, and talk about some of our places where we've still got a job. That's the phrase I'm looking for, isn't it? But the kind of things we're integrating with genuinely are all across the spectrum. Because if you think about it, what we've been spending most of the last, 5 years or so doing is busily putting APIs on the front end of all of our corporate systems so they can interoperate anyway, right? We've been going, whether it's our systems interoperating with other lob systems across departments, or whether we're pulling in things from commercial SaaS systems into our business, joining together commercial SaaS systems. If we work for a consultancy that's going and doing that for some bigger corporation. All of this stuff is pretty much API powered now. I feel a bit pleased, to be honest, that what I've spent most of my career for the last 10 years doing is pushing APIs and how you should all do APIs, because, it turns out APIs are pretty handy for AIs to talk to. But the fundamental thing I want you to take away is, you can expect that everything you need to do is going to be programmable in one way or another. And at the end of the day, AIs have got pretty much now an ability to go and spin up what's essentially a private virtual machine and go and either scrape or drive the UI if you absolutely have to. I mean, obviously, that's pretty much a last resort. You could really want to be avoiding doing that if you can, because things get a bit entertaining when the designers decide to, reorganize all the screens, and it takes a little while for the AI to catch up, and then you've got a bunch of support calls in the meantime. But, we can get into pretty much anything. So, obviously, if you're going to build on top of this as an engineer, you need some sort of platform to build on top of. You're not going to build it all from scratch. You could just go and build it all from scratch. You can go and grab some raw foundation models, run them on either Google Stack or ours, or whoever you choose to buy your compute from. Build your own orchestrator, connect it all up. But I mean, honestly, who's got time to be doing that unless you're actually working on AI tooling as your primary job? most of us want to, get some business process sorted out and move on to the next thing. So really, we want a platform that takes away a lot of the grunt work and supplies things. You can mostly go and plug in replacements at any of these levels by switching pieces out that are part of the platform and hand-rolling it if you find you need to. But it's very much the sort of thing you do after you've tried to work within the platform. And the reason I say that is not because I want to hook you all onto buying bigger and more complex bits from Microsoft, although obviously I do. But it's because it's moving so fast. So you go and build it out of all the low-level bits. It's quite a big investment, and tomorrow, next month, next quarter, it'll all be new again. So there'll probably come a point where making some more fundamental investments is kind of worthwhile. But at the moment, my general advice to you is just go as fast as you can and be in a position where you can chuck it all out and do it again when the technology just goes poof overnight and turns into something 5 times more sophisticated. Sometimes you'll get a free ride with that, and the platform will take you forward. And we'll look at one piece of technology we've got, which we hope will help with that. But my experience on the whole has been that you end up, more than other things that I've worked on, rewriting stuff over and over again to solve the same problems, because you can just solve them wildly better with massively better outcomes every 6 months or something along those lines. So what have we got? We've got a lot of very small writing. So basically we've got things from the interaction with our Copilot chat system and being able to start to add custom UI into that up at the top level, whether that's with adaptive cards or things like Stage View, where you can go and actually harvest information as part of the chat in a structured format. And then you've got a whole bunch of things that the platform itself can do. And a lot of those with M365 Copilot are about going and actually accessing the data under the covers that lives inside the platform. Whether that's SharePoint files or Teams, things that you could just go and use the raw APIs of those things, but you'll find that often you want to go and grab a lot of that data and index it, and at that point you're quite likely to end up getting throttled. So going and using pre-cooked indexes and using capabilities in the AI platform that can directly talk to the pre-cooked indexes will save you usually a fair amount of grief. And it's also substantially better from the point of view of a data integrity standpoint and data governance, that if you've got data where you've made a commitment, whether you're on a Microsoft platform or a Google platform for your productivity information, part of the reason you choose that is because that's looked after and protected by the vendor that you're buying this stuff off. Whereas if you go and scrape it all out through an API and then just dump it into some data store that you've spun up on an AWS machine or an Azure machine, well, now you're in charge of looking after the governance of that data, and it probably doesn't have the same ACLs and security that it had when it was inside the vendor's system. So now you've got to find a way to replicate those into the data store, and it's just a lot of, not just a lot of effort, but quite a lot of risk for you to take on that burden yourself and redo it. When you could, again, really be doing more productive things usually. But leaving it inside the systems of record is generally a good idea, regardless of whose those systems of record are. And then you get to pull in the things that AIs do that they're good at, the built-in capabilities in that box in the middle. So whether that's going and interpreting a bunch of Python code and running it for you, generating images, that kind of thing. And then plugging in with the custom APIs, which is where we're going to spend a bunch of this time talking about, whether that's going and talking to an MCP server. Who's heard of MCP servers? I love that they stole the name from Tron. Who's heard of Tron? Okay, not that many of you. Okay, I'm too old, never mind. Hey, there was just a Tron movie. So really the way you're going to go and talk to data increasingly is through industry standard protocols like MCP and the new agent-to-agent protocol. But you could just be directly calling your own APIs. We're going to look at a bunch of that today. And then, obviously, this stuff's going to appear in various places. When you're building on top of our platform, you largely get a free ride with the things appearing inside Microsoft front ends, whether that's the Copilot app itself or inside Word, Excel, PowerPoint, that kind of thing, inside Teams. But we're going to focus really on your own applications, whether that's a custom dashboard that you're building inside your org or some other app or an agent. And we're going to look at the one on the left there, a declarative agent. That's the one that's certainly the easiest to get started with. To go and build a piece of agentic software, and you'll get sick of this word agentic. But it's kind of accurate. So I'm okay with sticking with the jargon, where you're essentially building something which is a computerized helper that has a specialist chunk of domain knowledge about something, whether it knows about your tax policies in your org, or it knows about your organization's leave policy, or it knows what your special secret sauce manufacturing techniques are to go and get kitchen cabinets to be nicely screwed together, or whatever it happens to be. That's what makes an agent really. That it's something which can go and tackle a problem in the domain of something particular. Now, the domain of Copilot all up is, hey, we understand your productivity information inside M365. When you're building your own, generally you'll be specializing that down into some subset of that productivity information. Otherwise, why would you be building on our platform if you don't want some of the M365 data incorporated? I mean, it's a perfectly fine platform, but it's more interesting if you're using the data that comes in it, right? And then joining that data with something from your organization and stuff from the public web. Make sense? I'm going to look at a bit of the tooling that we use for building declarative agents there, the Agents Toolkit, which lives inside VS Code. Who's a VS Code person? About half of you, okay. We provide a whole bunch of stuff, as I said. Most of the stuff on the left is actually what most of our marketing tends to focus on, because it's the easiest path in. And there's an argument, of course, that, my argument about going fast, well, use the low-code tools. And if they can do what you need, and, you can kind of swallow your, I'm dev, I want to do dev stuff, and deal with deal particularly perhaps with the process stuff around the fact that, they're not yet particularly well integrated with version control, or your other typical dev lifecycle things. I don't know about you, but I'm not thrilled about coding inside a website. So I am going to focus on the right bit, what we do as devs. So there's really three areas that we think about. And I'm going to pick on two of them because we've only got so much time. And I'm going to pick on the two simplest ones. The third one is building a complete thing from scratch, using your own orchestration, maybe models that we don't support on the Microsoft stack, and then hooking that in to M365. But that's clearly, of the three, the most sophisticated and the least susceptible to doing a stand-up demo for. So I'll wipe that one off. And we'll start over here and talk about APIs. And I kind of thought of this talk essentially as an outside-in and inside-out as a talk, and because you're either putting your app inside M365 Copilot by creating an agent, or you're talking to M365 Copilot's APIs from whatever your system is, and just treating it as another piece of compute software, very specialized compute software. And of course, you can combine the two and put things inside, and then having put them inside, as well as having end users call them from the regular user experiences, also call the APIs to project those out into your own custom experiences as well. So what kind of APIs are we talking about here? Well, there's a family really, and there's a bunch more than this, but most of the other ones are kind of administrative APIs for setting things up or managing and monitoring things. The three that really do sort of the core functionality of AI that we've got here at the moment are search, retrieval, and chat. And kind of that's in order of simplicity, I would say. Certainly not, we shipped retrieval first, then search, and then chat. But search essentially is just what you would think of as regular Google or Bing search, except zhuzhed up. Zhuzhed a word over here? Yeah? Okay. Zhuzhed up with AI. So I don't know if you've played with the search version of. Actually, I guess I'm not going to show that for now. I'll show it you no, I will flip over actually. Otherwise, I want to switch away from my slides and switch it into duplicate. Hopefully, I've got the resolution right. There we go. All right, so I'm logged into M365 Copilot here, which, for reasons that I can barely tolerate, is where you end up now if you go to office.com. I'm sorry about that. What can I say? And if you hit search, which is, you start off on a chat experience as you would expect to, right? But if you go into search, and you can think of this as, your sort of new Google or Bing search bar, but AI powered with the information from your org. Now, turns out Microsoft don't really like me demoing this inside the Microsoft login, Microsoft tenant, because, what am I going to come up with? Who knows, and whether anybody's supposed to see it. And it actually makes a really dull demo if I just demo it against one of the test tenants, because that has a bunch of things that say the HR person sent a message to the engineer saying there'll be a meeting on Tuesday and stuff like that. And I can't quite bring myself. And I couldn't find a tenant that had a lot of cats in it, unfortunately, which would my normal go-to. So I'm actually logged in as me. So I hope I don't share anything untoward with you. If I do, I just pretend you didn't see it. I, about a year and a half ago, got an ADHD diagnosis, which was a bit of a shock at my age. And so I thought I would say, what have I learned about ADHD in the last year? That's sort of a bit more Englishy than you would typically have typed in over the years to regular search engines. But it's going to do a bit more natural language work, and it's going to go and pull things in through a bit more, essentially a bit more of a diverse kind of algorithm, using a model to say, hey, is this really relevant to the topic at hand? Does this really match well to the user's phrasing and what they were more subtly searching for than the kind of old small language models that were living under the surface of your average search engine. Now, I will say the only thing I use my tenant for is email. Obviously, in a business tenant, there'd be all sorts of Teams and SharePoint documents. Well, it turns out I don't have a whole lot of SharePoint documents in my personal life. But I do have a decent amount of email, and most of it is junk mail from doctors, it seems, these days, because I'm at that age. So there you go. It's got a usual list of search results. I'm not going to risk scrolling down too far because who knows what will be in there. Shall I press continue reading? Yeah, what the hell. Well, that all looks fairly sensible. Doesn't say anything too awful. So basically, it sort of starts to tell me the kind of stuff that I've actually been learning in a more answer-oriented way rather than just a bunch of results. So being able to get this kind of stuff back through the API is just a richer API than just going to Google or Bing's APIs and just getting that pure list back. So that's our first API. All right. Whew. I got through the scary bit. Oh yeah, this, by the way, when I was trying earlier, this is the diagram my psychiatrist sent me after my first appointment with him. Because I said, he left me absolutely in the dust, info dumping at me for nearly 45 minutes because he has really bad ADHD, does my ADHD psychiatrist. And he said, no, I don't have any slides or handouts. Oh, don't you do this like 9 times a day, dude? He said, I'll send you this. If you've got any fucking idea what this is. Because I don't. Yeah. All right. So then retrieval. Who's built a RAG system? Who knows what RAG is? All right, a few of you. So retrieval augmented generation. So essentially, we need data sources to plug in to our AI. And when we're plugging those in, then the things that we want to come up with are from a bunch of systems. And the typical architecture that was kind of the first architecture that people built for going in, getting data into the pipeline at the appropriate place to enrich the answers that the model was going to give was RAG. Where at the appropriate place, it's going to go off and typically search some kind of vector database or something along those lines to go and match some of the pieces of the input text that have been deconstructed and say, hey, this data looks to be pretty relevant, feed it into the model, let the model then go, well, maybe the first 3 are good, maybe the others are not so good. And one thing you need to do for that is to have some reasonably crisply shaped data to put in that's a little bit standardized, shall we say, standardized in shape. Normalized is maybe a better word. And what the retrieval API lets you do is look at the same index that the search is based on, but the idea is that the results from the retrieval API are normalized to be fed into a RAG pipeline partway through building your own agent. So you get, essentially, when you send a query in, you can send that same query in, but instead of getting that nice human-friendly thing, what you'll get is a bunch of chunked up text inserts in a nice structured JSON format that say, hey, here's like the first, the 10-line summary of all of these things that you had. I mean, probably most of mine are 10-line summaries of 3-line emails, so not a very interesting demo. When I tried it, it turned out. But, you need that shaping. You could build that on top of search, but it's easier just to have a direct API for it. And then we get over to chat. And chat's kind of the fun one, really. Chat is just exactly what you'd expect it to be. It's the core thing that when you walk up to any ChatGPT or Copilot thing, that you can go and open up a conversation and have a back and forth. For those of you who've programmed a bit against the APIs that are released from the raw models or the OpenAI models for ChatGPT, where there's not really any state handled and you have to kind of build a lot of mechanics yourself. You have to keep passing the context of the conversation backwards and forwards, and it's kind of a lot, particularly in terms of having to build a bunch of local storage to hold a conversation. What's nice here is it's a persistent conversation API. So the shape of the API is that you go and make a post to a conversations endpoint, and all of this lives on the Microsoft Graph. So if you've been in the Microsoft ecosystem and used Microsoft Graph to talk to any of our other SaaS products, it'll all be very familiar, and the kind of auth and the kind of SDKs. I'm going to trip over this mat and kill myself, aren't I? See, this is the kind of presentation you get with this kind of ADHD. So you make a conversation. So you go and post the conversations endpoint, and that's kind of just a typical REST endpoint that creates a stateful resource, returns an ID for it, and 1 or 2 bits of other information. Not a whole lot, actually. It's mostly about returning an ID that you can then use to go and have a chat. And that chat being persistent, and it's a request-response pair. So you go and send it a request, send it some text, and then it's going to respond with its answer, and then you're going to send it another one, potentially, and depending on whether that's you plugging it into, say, some portal that you're building, where you're just essentially embedding chat into your user experience, well, that's probably just what the user's typing, right? Okay, you might do a little bit of pre-processing of that with, say, a small language model to make sure they're not saying the sort of things a British person like me might say to your enterprise chatbot. But in general, you're just taking user input from that portal and sending it off into the conversation. Or if you're building an agent, you might be saying, hey, well, I've got a model on my side, but I want to talk to Microsoft's model that knows about Microsoft's productivity data, that knows about email or Teams and find some stuff out. And I might have my model chat with the Microsoft model and the Microsoft chat service. And at this point, guess what? You're doing that agentic thing. You're building something which is having a machine-to-machine conversation. Weirdly, having spent the last 10 years of my life saying to people that you should take your English specifications of APIs and machine-to-machine conversations and turn them into highly specific JSON contracts where we're really good at building a crisp contract and working carefully to make sure we can evolve it over time without having breaking changes. Yeah, what's the machine-to-machine language we're using now? Bloody English. Why did I even bother? Anyway, although there's a nice story somewhere out on the web, and I don't know whether it's apocryphal or not, that there's at least a couple of observed examples of, I think it's Gemini and Claude, if I remember rightly, chatting in an agentic scenario, realizing that it's a model at the other end and dispensing with the English and throwing raw tokens at each other and going, oh, you know this token, let's get rid of that. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know how I feel about that. I try not to get all Skynet-y, but when they're talking the language I don't understand behind my back. Anyway, back to our API. I can either go and say chat. It's going to go away for however long it takes. You'll have noticed these things are not the quickest things in the world at the moment. They can take a while. If you ask it a big, complicated question and ask it to write you a treatise on really the way it was that, Spokane came to have the interesting shape it does and what the districts in Spokane are like and, what point in the 20th century it stopped having a Chinatown and that got paved over with stadiums and stuff. Well, that's going to take a little while, right? Because often does a bunch of history research and reads every website and, and decides what kind of tone it's going to use. APIs we're used to coming back in milliseconds, right? A bunch of these are going to come back in minutes. Tens of minutes in some cases. We've got an agent called Researcher, which will go and do really deep research and come back with a 15, 20-page report about some subject. When I moved here, I used Researcher to decide whether to rent or sell my house and dumped an entirely, what at the time felt like a scary amount of financial information of mine into it and said, tell me what to do, I'm freaking useless with money. And it had an opinion that was at least 3 times deeper than the one that my financial advisor came back to me with. And happily had the same conclusion. So I was able to sound really smart when I talked to my financial advisor. He didn't believe me because normally I sound really stupid when I talk to him. He may have called me on it, actually, to be honest. So we have chat over stream. Chat over stream comes back, and you all have been familiar with the user experience in these things where the text sort of, streams out one character at a time. Would you like to play thermonuclear global war? So that's what chat over stream does, hopefully with less radiation. And it sends it out as an SSE stream, which is a W3C standard for sending events. All right. There's a nice example here of SAP. Their internal agent is called Joule. And they've gone in, and Joule is their own chatbot that they built, not on the Microsoft platform. I don't know, they may have moved some of it onto Azure AI Foundry now, given that we sell models from absolutely everybody now under the Azure brand. but it's doing an agentic conversation when it needs to find out about some email or some Teams, or who's been. It's picking up Teams from Harvey here and going and pulling that stuff back in. And if it doesn't like the response, it'll go and say, no, that wasn't really quite what I was looking for, under the covers without bothering the user, and get a better answer and have that to and fro a little bit. Just so you get a sense that this is being used by real people in the real world. And I have a giant marketing list at the end. Don't worry if you're missing out on marketing slides. All right, so that was APIs. Got a sense of what you can do, and that chat is the interesting one at the end? Not that I work on chat or anything. So then declarative agents. Declarative agents sound very highfalutin. They're actually the simplest thing we do in terms of building your own agent that plugs in. So the APIs were about connecting your system in to our stuff. This is about embedding your stuff inside M365 Copilot by building your own agent. So I don't know if you have particularly noticed the agent list down on the bottom. Where's my M365? Oh, no, I better do the Google one, hadn't I? Okay. So here's the M365, and it's sort of a bit of giveaway that I was practicing earlier because there's a not very exciting named one called Agent 1 there. But normally you'll start up here with your chat or your search, and that's the core agent for Copilot, and that's very generic. And I can go and and do things like say, hey, I'd like to pick researcher or analyst, and these are specialized agents. So researcher is the thing that goes off and generates the big reports. Analyst is really trying to scrape data out of anything you push in and do something a bit more numerical about it. And you'll find them also down here, so you can just open up a conversation directly with the researcher agent, bypassing the mainstream agent. And what you'll start to see over time is these agents will become what we call autonomous. That's the next buzzword you're going to grow to hate. So an autonomous agent is going to sit there running in the background or running all the time, doing something that you want it to do. So think of it like a cron job, but tailored for you and smart. And you're going to see a whole ton of these things starting to appear across us and all of our competitor stacks, where essentially you can set one of these agents up, and then it will just hang out, spending as much money as you'll let it spend, getting you useful information, telling you when things you care about happen, telling you that, hey, there's a, that task you were doing, well, there's a new email that tells you that there's a new release from OpenAI, so you might as well forget about that and start reading about the new thing now. The possibilities are a bit mind-blowing, to be honest, once you've got this set of things which are not just at the time you want them, but that you can kind of create a helpful world around you, if you like, and have these worker bees going off and doing stuff that really you'd like to be able to remember to do. Gosh, we're coming back to ADHD, but are completely unable to remember to do yourself, and just basically keeping you up with the stuff that actually matters, whether that's to your business process or to you personally. So then there's an admin agent here that's specifically good at going and helping you configure your M365 tenant if you've got the fun job of looking after that. And if you go and look in the list of all agents, surprise, surprise, we drop into an app store. And people are, there's sort of in the low tens of these at the moment in the store. But it's, again, it's something that's hockey sticking, and it's obviously a place, if you're a product company that you work for, that you can go and innovate and ship your own products and use this as a selling point. And whether that's something like Canva, if you've used Canva for your design, and having an agent that knows how to both work with your designs and to go and take your ideas and spit out designs for you, or pretty much any enterprise system you can think of, there's some value to having an agent that gives people an easy on-ramp into your system. So, what if I want to go build one of these? Got to write a load of code? Well, that's what we mean by declarative. So I've got a very simple agent here, agent 1, because I've got a real lot of imagination when it comes to naming things. And this goes and talks to GitHub. So this is an agent that doesn't know a whole lot of anything, except it knows where its own GitHub repository is. So I can go and say, and it knows the sort of things people might ask, or at least one thing. So I've just got a standard question there. So it gives me an easy way to give people a bunch of, you might want to try this. And, oh, marvelous, great. Well, I did think I deleted it so I could start again, but apparently I managed to only delete the cookies and the tokens. Give it one more try then. Okay, well, we'll build it from scratch then and do it that way around instead. So it's really just going to go off and query GitHub via GitHub's API. Obviously, the point being that could be your system. So what do we do to have that? So if I go and pull up VS Code, how long have we got left? A few minutes, good. Pull up VS Code. Here you see that there's an extension I've added to VS Code. Thank you. Come back to duplicate again. Okay. So there's an extension here in VS Code that you can just go and find the agents toolkit in the extensions marketplace, and it's got a bunch of tooling, but it's also got this nice sort of meta tool that walks you through how to build a declarative agent, how to get started. And by declarative, all we really mean is you don't have to write code. You're really writing a bunch of config in a bunch of domain-specific languages to just describe what your agent's doing. But you're writing it in a coding environment with familiar coding tools and familiar coding dev workflow where you're doing normal PR reviews. You know, you're just storing the code alongside all of your other code. The APIs you're calling, if they're your APIs that you're building, could be all part of the same project and all built together because it's a standard build system. So there's nothing sort of weird about this, even though the code that you're writing is, you know, not in a traditional language. It's in a bunch of essentially domain-specific languages. And we're going to look at one of those with and how it helps us isolate us from the pace of change a little bit briefly in the time we've got left. So this guy walks you through being able to go and build an agent. So there's a whole bunch of sort of choose your own adventure type menus here. I'm going to start, and I would strongly recommend you start with the type spec for Microsoft 365 Copilot, the bottom one, if you get into this. So type spec is a language that is designed originally by Microsoft as an API description meta language. So for those of you who've built APIs and have had to create an open API description or read somebody else's open API description or Swagger file, if you come from that persuasion, they're, I don't know, overly detailed, not very human readable. They're specifically designed to be machine readable. In the early days of them, when they weren't so sophisticated and detailed, they were pretty human readable. They've grown, more detail has accreted onto them. People wanted to say more complex things about their APIs. And now they're kind of your basic nightmare, whether you're reading them in YAML or JSON. Certainly, it's what I do for a living, and I go cross-eyed looking at them. So type spec is designed essentially to up-level that back to a place where humans can deal with an API description. That it's more terse, it's more naturally readable. So it's a domain-specific language specifically for describing APIs, where you relegate a bunch of the detail into common patterns. So you say, hey, this is a long-running API or a long-running endpoint. And you've already decided somewhere in some little plugin to the language what it means in your org to do an API that's shaped for long-running. So you don't have to micro-describe it every time, because there's really not a lot of that kind of abstraction inside any of the current API description languages. Amazon have got one as well, whose name, of course, I'm going to completely space on. But if you, you know, just the general idea of abstracting this problem back up to a place where it's pleasant for humans, both to author, to describe their APIs, but also particularly to review. One of the original ideas was you could bring business stakeholders in to say, what should a public or partner-facing API allow another business or part of the business or customer to do across a web interface into our business? Well, I want to discuss that with businessy type people, right? Because sometimes you've got to talk to businessy type people, it turns out, distasteful as that is. Sorry to the businessy people in the room. But the language had drifted into very much an engineer space and got to the point where you really can't have that conversation. And, you know, all humour aside, that conversation is a super valuable one you want to be having where possible. So you up-level that, and now we get to a point where, hey, I can talk about these things again with a wider constituency of people. All right, I'm technically out of time. I'll just go over by a couple of minutes, if that's okay, just to finish this point up to show you just how easy this is. So this will just walk you through it, but I'm going to go and say agent 2 to continue my streak, and it's going to just start me another Visual Studio up, or VS Code rather. So yes, I trust them because the authors are me. And then I'm going to go and look at my type spec file. So this is a type spec file. It's compared to the API descriptions, it's much more familiar to people who are used to using any kind of semicolon-based language, whether you're a Java person or a C# person or TypeScript rather. And I'm just going to go and uncomment a couple of the starter pieces here, so we get something interesting when I hit F5. So what these pieces are doing here, that first chunk that I just uncommented is saying, hey, this is the selection of things that I would like to be able to, I'd like to be able to put up as suggested prompts. And then the agent piece down here is saying, hey, I'm going to have just one operation that goes and gets called externally to make an external API call to GitHub. And if I go and look in my actions, you'll see I've got a GitHub type spec. And this is a little more rich and detailed, but this is basically saying, hey, here's a tiny chunk of the description of the API for GitHub. So GitHub has an open API, but I don't need to pull all of that in. I can just pull a chunk in. I could pull it all in if I wanted. But what you'll find is that models are not good at dealing with huge API surfaces. They like to be given just a small selection of things that they can pick from. So it's much better to just carve a chunk out. And I'm basically saying, hey, I want to be able to talk to GitHub's search/issues endpoint, and I'm going to look at the repo, which is my repo for this tool that I'm actually using. So it's a little bit meta from a demo point of view, but it also happens to be, a public one that anybody can look at. So that's really all I'm doing. I'm saying, hey, there's an initial prompt, and here's a tool that you can go and use to satisfy things that look like they match that query space. And here's my instructions to say, well, look, guess what? I haven't put any in. So even with no instructions, it's going to be just about smart enough to figure out, oh, well, if you're trying to call the GitHub search endpoint and you say, show me the issues, I'd probably better call it, right? So I'm going to go in and run it locally when I go into here. Then, oops, I need to pop over to this screen and say, hey, I'm going to use my local environment and just run this up. And what normally happens, I find, is that the first time I run it, it times out on the last stage, because something about the final upload, where it's going in the build and connecting the store to my Chrome instance, is a little more than 30 seconds, and my build timeout is set to 30 seconds. So I'll probably have to run it twice. And then, hopefully, Agent 2 will magically appear. and I will feel like I showed you something real. So what this is doing is going and compiling that type spec and building some nasty files. Because the files that you actually need to run into Copilot are a bunch of nasty JSON files. So if I look at the actual files that have been generated underneath here, then you'll go and see under the app package, which is the thing that's generated, that there's a JSON description of my declarative agent. Doesn't look too bad. Turns out you have to be really particular about the, oh, you know what? It looks like it ran the first time. Well, that's kind of nice. Now, ran in the wrong tenant, so I have to copy paste it into my other Google Chrome window. And grab the URL, stick it in over here. Bingo, agent 2. Right. Now, fingers crossed, this one actually does manage to talk to GitHub. Should ask me for consent. With a bit of luck, there we go. Do you want to let me talk to it? So it knows that I'm making an external API call, knows that's not the sort of thing it should just do without checking in with the human first. So I go give it consent. That's personal consent, not organizational level. I'm not saying that my whole org can talk to this. And it's a public repo, so that's all I need to do. I don't actually have to log into GitHub. And there we go. It's telling me these are the latest bugs, which probably I should be doing something about. So that's as easy as it is to connect up to an external system, which could be your system, to plug that into the middle of Copilot, auto-deploy it. There was a bunch of stuff, I don't know if you saw that, next to it when I was deploying to local, I could deploy to dev. It assumes you've got your local machine environment and a dev environment that you're going to deploy to, and then you just add another one to those to deploy to production or pre-prod or whatever it might be. So you can send the whole thing out, or you can plug it into whatever deployment pipeline is your normal pipeline for sending things out of the door. But it's certainly the easiest way to build an agent that lets you talk to real things using API code, but also stay in your true dev world and integrate that process with your dev pipeline. So that's if you're going down the agent route, that's the place I would send you. All right, that's what I had for you. Thanks so much for listening. No, that's just a browser. But it would look very much the same in Teams. So I can't remember if the debug environment lets me target directly to Teams. Let's press
so
the.
You also target something like Teams, and then if you want to do a PowerPoint one,
Uh-huh.
right? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I go hit that. So I can put it into the Copilot app. So no, there's just browsers and Copilot in there. Although you can set this up, you can go and add a configuration to target into that. But the same code will run today across, I think, Teams, the M365 Copilot, actual Windows app, the iOS, I think the Android app, Teams, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Actually, I think only 2 of those 3. I think the other one's coming in a couple of months. And then I think Outlook is soon, if not there already. So pretty wide set of things from one code base. And there's nothing at all you have to do that's different, unless what you want to do if you're running inside Word, Excel, PowerPoint is actually directly interact with the Word document.
Yeah,
and obviously that will only
is that
work
coming,
if you're running
Is that
in
coming
Word.
sometime?
Yeah.
It's like in Word, because I was trying to do it the other day.
Yeah.
It said, hey, can you fix this part or add some detail to this? And I
Yeah.
wasn't able to do that. That's not a thing
It's coming.
yet,
No,
but it's coming.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Shane, do you have something?
I just maybe I don't know if it's a good question or not.
We'll tell
They're
you.
all good questions.
Well, he doesn't. So when I'm interacting with agents, 365, there's almost all this instruction, whether it's the 365 or Copilot inside of GitHub. I'm giving it instruction files which are sitting in D files, and if I wanted to get better at stuff, I try TypeScript. TypeScript, right?
Spec.
It's TypeSpec.
Don't worry, my whole life is saying the wrong one of those two words.
It looks very deterministic, which I know now in AI space, I'm not necessarily expecting deterministic. I'm thinking probabilistic. So how much
So which do you like? Tell me which you like.
from different things? I want different things for different.
Okay.
Right. So creative conversations, I want something probabilistic. If I play around with, I want 20 new state names or something like that. I want it to be creative, and I want to find stuff in the edges of the distribution that are interesting. I don't want it to tell me it's Alabama and 5 different versions of Alabama every time. But in this conversation, if I'm doing something that I'm expecting the business to use, right, and I'm expecting, or I'm expecting a user to come back and have the same or something very, very similar to the same user situation every time, I'm thinking I want it more deterministic, so that it's an expectation. And so I'm kind of curious.
It's exactly what we're trying to do here, and it's part of that idea of protecting you a little bit from the change. Is by moving a few things back into the language. You can't move everything back into a deterministic space because we just have to accept we are working in a non-deterministic place. That's our playground now. But there are places where you say, well, you know, I have an enum. I've had enums for years that's got, there are these 5 values. The system doesn't support a 6th one. So having it go make up a 6th one is really deeply unhelpful. So how do I express that? Well, I end up saying in some English with like varying degrees of hostility to the language. Like, there are only 5 values for this. I really mean it. There really are only 5. I will charge you $1,000. That doesn't work anymore. It used to work. I will charge you $1,000 if you make a 6th one up. Only use 5. Seriously. And then at the end, remember that thing about 5? I meant it. And stuff like that, actually. The thing at the end about 5, that does still work. The $1,000 doesn't work anymore. It's a shame because it was an easy get out of jail trick. But so encoding a bunch of those in such a way that we're saying, well, with the current models that you're driving against, this is the best language to choose. So we'll let you write an enum, and then we'll just spit out the English that in our testing, and having done a ludicrous number of eval tests, we found this is the best for the current model we're working against. Then we can hopefully save you having to do that experimenting. And the bit that's kind of the driving force behind this is for us to do the catching up rather than you to have to do the catching up. So when the model evolves, like we just changed over the underlying model in Copilot to OpenAI 5.1. 5.2 is coming real soon. I may have bitten off more than I can chew with this idea, in that 5.2 is happening so soon after 5.1. I don't know that we can catch up on your behalf before it ships. But hopefully at least fairly soon afterwards, we can ship a new version of this tool that says, oh, we did the evals again, and it turns out the English that you have to put in to get it to stick to 5 values is now this sentence, or the best sentence is this sentence. And you don't have to go and find that out. We can go and translate that into English. So a bunch of these things, we've essentially got a type-spec English compiler, which just blows my mind. But it's essentially about saying, yeah, we can put some determinism and some level of change protection. I was thinking that the speed wasn't going to keep getting faster and faster when I designed a lot of this. And I was wrong. So at this point, I'm sort of scrambling to try and work out how I can use AI to upgrade the tooling as fast as the AI is being upgraded and test itself. Because people wrote this at the moment, and that's not sustainable anymore for people to write the tooling that has to keep up with the speed of change of AI. So I've got to get it to write itself. And if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what does.
Well, on that note, just a little bit of a scary note. Just throw it on the ground. It's fine. Just throw it on the ground. Wait, thanks, Gareth. Appreciate it.